Imagine you are Thomas Jefferson in 1802. Half the country's future is flowing down one river. The Mississippi is the trade route, and New Orleans is the gate. Suddenly, a bureaucratic decision has threatened to strangle the entire Western economy. Jefferson is not trying to buy half a continent, he's trying to buy one city. But soon, he's about to be offered a deal so big it might not even be legal. 0.25 to 1.20. Why New Orleans mattered set stakes. To understand the Louisiana Purchase, you need to step into the shoes of an 1800 merchant. Roads were slow, expensive, and unreliable. Rivers were the lifeblood of trade. The Mississippi River was everything for farmers and settlers living west of the Appalachians. It was the only realistic way to move goods to global markets, and New Orleans sat at the mouth of that river, controlling the flow. For years the U.S. had negotiated with Spain over access to the port. In 1795, Spain gave the United States the right of deposit, which meant Americans could store goods in New Orleans for export. But then, in 1802, Spain suddenly pulled that right back, shutting off access to the crucial port. The farmers in the West were furious. Talk of conflict between the U.S. and Spain grew louder, and Jefferson was caught in the middle, trying to find a solution. To Jefferson, this wasn't just about trade. If the West couldn't sell its goods, what reason would anyone have to stay tied to the East? The issue was bigger than a city. It was about the future of the United States itself. 122 to 15, the international chessboard. France enters in 1800. Spain secretly transferred control of Louisiana back to France through the Treaty of San Ildefonso. But France, under Napoleon, wasn't the same kind of power the U.S. had been dealing with before. Napoleon had big ambitions in North America, and the United States suddenly found itself facing a much stronger adversary. Jefferson saw the threat clearly. If France controlled New Orleans and the Mississippi, the young United States would be boxed in. The U.S. expansion could be choked off, and with Britain's naval power still looming, Jefferson couldn't risk it. So, he sent diplomats to Paris with one clear goal: buy New Orleans. A simple request, but the French, in the midst of their own issues, had a different idea. 215 to 330, the surprise offer. The first big up. Instead of just selling New Orleans, the French offered the entire Louisiana territory, not a strip of land or a corridor, but the whole massive region. The American diplomats in Paris, Robert Livingston and James Monroe, weren't expecting this. They had no instructions to buy half a continent, but they knew the opportunity was rare. If they hesitated, Napoleon might change his mind, or Britain could seize it in a war. Either way, the U.S. would be left with the same problem. So, they acted fast. On April 30, 1803, the treaty was signed. The price, $15 million. The land about 828,000 square miles, doubling the size of the United States. It was a bargain. But it wasn't just a lucky purchase, it was a bold gamble. 330 to 440. Why Napoleon sold it down, then up. Now, you might be wondering why Napoleon would sell such a huge territory for such a low price. The answer lies in France's troubles. Napoleon had big plans for an empire in the Americas, but his efforts were falling apart. His dream of rebuilding French power in the Caribbean, particularly in Haiti, was crumbling. The Haitian Revolution had drained resources and soldiers, and the situation in Europe was only getting worse. With Britain threatening to attack, Napoleon needed money, and he needed it fast. Selling Louisiana wasn't just a financial necessity, it was also a strategic move. By selling it to the United States, Napoleon ensured that Britain couldn't seize the territory. So, what seemed like a bargain was really a pragmatic decision for Napoleon. For 42-550, Jefferson's constitutional problem. Tension spiked. Now, let's talk about the internal conflict Jefferson faced. Jefferson was cautious about expanding federal power. The Constitution didn't give the president the explicit power to buy foreign land. So when Jefferson got word of the offer, he was caught between two competing priorities: securing the future of the nation and staying true to his strict interpretation of the Constitution. There was immediate opposition. Some argued the purchase was unconstitutional. Jefferson himself wasn't entirely sure he had the authority. At first he considered waiting for a constitutional amendment to approve the purchase, but in the end, Jefferson chose to act quickly. He sent the treaty to the Senate, hoping that the immediate need for the territory would outweigh the legal concerns, and the Senate ratified it. Jefferson's gamble paid off, but it set a new precedent. The executive branch now had the power to make significant territorial acquisitions, a decision that would shape the future of the country. 552-705, not empty land, the moral and human reality. Now, here's where the story gets more complicated. When we talk about the Louisiana Purchase, it's easy to think of it as a simple real estate deal, but it wasn't. The land wasn't empty. Around 100,000 people were already living in the territory when the U.S. made the purchase. These were not just French and Spanish settlers. Native nations had lived there for centuries, and they had their own systems of trade, governance, and land use. The U.S. didn't just buy land, it bought the French claim to it. The real question was, who truly controlled it? In practical terms, the purchase meant the U.S. now had the right to assert control, and that's exactly what happened. Native nations were displaced, and the expansion of slavery was put on a faster track. 705 to 805, taking possession and the messy details another twist. Even after the treaty was signed, the process of taking possession of the land was far from simple. In late 1803, the formal transfer of New Orleans took place, but the rest of the territory wasn't immediately under U.S. control. Various regions, like St. Louis, went through symbolic transfers of control, often referred to as Three Flags Day, as the land passed from Spain to France and then to the United States. But the real work of defining the boundaries of Louisiana was still to come. The borders were unclear in the treaty, and that caused tension between the United States and Spain for years. The U.S. wouldn't settle the issue of Louisiana's borders until the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. This wasn't just a purchase, it was the beginning of a long, complicated process of incorporating new land, new people, and new questions about governance and citizenship. 805 to 9 o'clock, payoff and closing high retention wrap. So, why is the Louisiana Purchase so important? It wasn't just a lucky bargain. It was the result of an international crisis, a quick political decision, and a constitutional gamble. It was about securing the future of the United States, but it also set in motion a century of conflict and expansion. The Louisiana Purchase opened the door to the West, but it also opened the door to the brutal realities of displacement, slavery, and conflict with native nations. It's a deal that doubled the size of the country, but it also left unresolved questions that would shape America's future. And that's why the Louisiana Purchase remains one of the most pivotal events in American history. It wasn't just a purchase. It was a turning point in the story of the United States.